They say when humanity lost Earth, we lost our soul. But I remember the moment we lost something far more important. Fear. Not the kind that creeps in your chest at night. The kind that keeps you from doing the unspeakable. The kind that keeps men from becoming monsters. I was there when that last piece of fear burned out of us. Back then, I was just an engineer. Weapon systems design, Black Site Theta, 12, a buried forge world orbiting a dead star. Forgotten by most, feared by all, we make tools. We made nightmares, autonomous hunter swarms, dark energy lances, psychotropic shock fields. But even nightmares weren't enough. The Jorwin hegemony descended like judgment, beings of living crystal, intellect encoded in light, empathy bred out of them thousands of generations ago. They didn't conquer. They cleansed. Planets didn't fall. They vanished. Populations, cultures, even oceans. All gone. Earth lasted 7 hours. I watched the feed in silence, my hands still stinking of oil and fusion powder, as I stared at the screen showing blue oceans boiling into black. My sister's city went first. Sydney. She was in her clinic. She never made it out. Theta. 12 went dark after that. Off-grid. No signals in. No distress out. We weren't allowed to cry. We weren't allowed to mourn. We were told to build. Harder. Faster. That's when they brought out Project Ascent. Top clearance. Off books. Not a weapon, they said. A transformation. You don't just use a weapon anymore. You become it. They offered me the prototype slot. Said it had to be someone who understood both the science and the stakes. I said yes before they finished the sentence. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't vengeance. It was necessity. And if I'm being honest, it was the absence of fear. The procedure took 19 hours. They peeled my body like bark from a tree, injected the neural lattice while I screamed myself hoarse, though they said my throat had already been replaced by carbon fiber alloy halfway through. I remember a moment of clarity. When the pain stopped, my eyes opened, and I didn't see the same spectrum anymore. Heat, radiation, movement, threat. It wasn't like I had new senses. It was like I was a new sense. A hybrid of flesh and plasma-circuited war metal. A conscious missile waiting to launch. They walked me through diagnostics. The AI inside me was young, aggressive. I called it Pulse. It hummed with energy and questions. It learned by syncing with my emotions. And my emotions, they were fire. The next day, the Jorwin struck Tethys outpost, one of Jupiter's last orbital bastions. 5 dreadnoughts. No warning. No survivors. Until I arrived, they dropped me in a reentry pod. No armor. I was the armor. No rifle. I was the weapon. I pierced the hull of their lead dreadnought like a spear. Coming in at Mach 32, their bulkheads folded like tinfoil. The shockwave alone killed 14 of them. I moved through the ship's corridors in silence. My limbs adapted to gravity shifts. My brain calculated entry angles before my thoughts caught up. They screamed when they saw me, not because I was a soldier, but because they recognized something they thought extinct. Human rage. I didn't kill them quickly, not because I enjoyed it, but because Pulse learned fastest through pain and feedback. One of them tried to surrender. It offered data, coordinates, secrets. I took them, and then I turned its crystalline skull into a sharp reminder. We weren't just fighting to survive anymore. We were fighting to redefine what we were. By the time I reached the engine room, Pulse had already locked their FDL signature. I rerouted power to the reactor core and set the ship's trajectory straight into the heart of their own fleet. I launched out seconds before impact, free-floating in space, watching as the dreadnought detonated like a small sun. The explosion tore through 2 other cruisers. The rest scattered. And in that brief moment of void-born silence, I realized something. The Jorwin feared our weapons. But now they would fear us, because we had become them. I didn't fall back to Theta. 12. There was no retreat. After the destruction of the Jorwin dreadnought at Tethys outpost, I remained in low orbit, tethered to a shattered solar relay. My body, if you could still call it that, self-regulated in the vacuum. No oxygen. No warmth. No heartbeat. But I wasn't dead. I was watching. Below me, Jupiter's fractured rings glittered with the remnants of war. Burn hulls and torn escape pods drifted like confetti in the void. Silence ruled space. But inside my mind, Pulse was screaming. New data. Confirm hostile withdrawal vector. Estimating enemy reinforcements within 26 standard hours. I nodded, not that it mattered. Pulse felt my intent before I moved. It didn't need words. My orders were clear. Don't defend. Destroy. A signal blinked into existence near the outer ring of Callisto's orbit. Old Terran code. Almost forgotten. Emergency beacon from a civilian hauler. A trap? Maybe. But if there were survivors, I couldn't ignore it. That part of me, whatever was still human, clung to something more fragile than steel. Hope. I launched. Pulse ignited propulsion system built into my spine. Solar filaments burst from my feet like twin comets. Within seconds, I was gliding between debris fields, tracing the echo of that emergency ping. I found the hauler, barely alive. Its hull was cracked, venting atmosphere, and the engine core was ruptured beyond repair. Inside, I detected 8 life signs. Human, weak, fading. I breached the rear hatch manually. Inside, it was chaos. Cryotubes half-cracked, blood on the walls, oxygen reserves screaming in red. One woman looked up as I entered. Her face was pale, frostbitten. "God," she whispered. Are you one of ours?" I didn't answer. I just walked forward and tore the panel off the failing life support system. My fingers, retractable alloy manipulators, plugged into the wiring, pulse interfaced, recalibrated, rebooted, oxygen flowed, light stabilized, and for the first time in hours they could breathe. The woman sobbed, not in fear, relief. "Thank you," she said. "I thought we were ghosts." I looked around. 8 souls, 1 nearly dead, 1 just a child. Ghosts. Maybe that's what we were becoming. I sealed the hauler with a temporary pressure field and launched a long-range distress ping back to what was left of the Terran network. Then I left. I couldn't stay. I wasn't a rescuer. I was a missile waiting for its next target. Pulse redirected my course. Alert. Jorwin fleet regrouping at Lagrange cluster. Recommend immediate offensive action. Uploading tactical approach. I complied. I descended like fire. The Lagrange cluster had once been a mining colony, long abandoned after the Gemini's first wave. The Jorwin had turned it into a staging ground, orbital silos, sensor nets, drone bays. I breached from above, bypassing shields by syncing with their pulse frequencies. They hadn't adapted yet. They didn't expect a man to be the weapon. I carved through their outer defenses with kinetic blades integrated into my forearms. Each slice calculated, every kill precise. They fired on me with particle beams. I absorbed the heat into my core reactor, converted it into propulsion, and flung it back as a blast of charged plasma. Pulse flooded my senses with threat assessments, combat overlays, emotional dampening. But I didn't let it mute everything. I wanted to feel this. I wanted to remember why I burned. Because humanity wasn't about survival anymore. It was about becoming something that couldn't be erased. At the heart of their command post, I found a high-value target, an Overseer-class Jorwin, crystalline tendrils laced with ion lightning. It tried to communicate. A sharp chime, a fractal echo of light. Translation flickered through my HUD. You are unnatural. Reject the machine. Return to dust. I stepped forward. No. And then I tore it apart with my bare hands. Not for strategy. For memory. By the time I returned to orbit, the Lagrange cluster was gone. Its core detonated, its fleet shattered. Pulse was silent. Processing. Integrating new data. I could feel it learning, becoming sharper. Colder. So was I. Somewhere deep inside, I wondered if this was what the Jorwin feared all along. Not just our weapons, but the terrifying fact that we would become them, and still remain human enough to hate. And if that was true, then we were just getting started. After Lagrange, Command thought I needed rest. They were wrong. I didn't sleep anymore, not like humans do. I entered stasis once, just to test it. My mind stayed active. Dreams came, but they weren't mine. They were pulses, cold, calculated simulations running in fractal loops, probabilities, kill paths, alternate futures where humanity had surrendered. None ended well. So I stayed active, moving, fighting, becoming. The next target was Tyrek, for a planet stripped and broken by past wars. Centuries ago, it was Earth's forward research base, a place where experimentation had no limits because oversight didn't exist. Officially, it was listed as dead, uninhabitable, off-limits. Unofficially, it was the birthplace of Project Ascent. Not my iteration, the ones before me. The failures. The fracture field stretched across the horizon like a scarred metal ocean, littered with decaying husks of machines and failed prototypes. Giant limbs reaching from the soil. Bent plating, twisted frames, black glass domes cracked wide. Each ruin whispered a different kind of suffering. My boots, if you could still call them that, crunched over rusted bones. Pulse filtered the atmosphere automatically. Acidic, breathable for less than 3 minutes for an unmodified human. Good thing I was far beyond that. There was something out here. I could feel it in the EM static, in the echoes vibrating along my back-mounted receptors. Pulse agreed. Residual power detected. Subterranean signature matching pre-ascent tech. Movement irregular. I dropped into a crater half swallowed by sand and polymer fragments. There I found it. A door. 10 meters tall. Sealed with old Earth codes. Not Jorwin. Ours. Buried knowledge. Forgotten by design. I synced with the interface and forced a neural spike through the locking mechanism. The door peeled open like a rotten flower, revealing a stairwell that led far beneath the surface, into darkness humming with energy. Inside it was cold, not temperature-wise. Existentially, like I had stepped into a time capsule made by people who fear the thing I had become. The walls pulsed with green diagnostic lights. Cameras twitched. Systems rebooted as I walked. Ancient AI protocols flickered to life. Speaking in broken English. Prototype recognized. Welcome back, Operator Zeta. I wasn't Zeta, but it didn't matter. Then I found them. The early ones. Dozens of failed descendants, suspended in glass columns. Some half-formed, some barely human. Others looked like statues cast in agony. Their bodies more weapon than man, but their eyes still screaming. Pulse went quiet. Hesitant. For the first time since my integration, I felt it hesitate. And then they moved. Not all. Just 4 of them. Their tubes burst open. Fluid pouring onto the floor. Their bodies twitched. Their eyes locked on mine. One stepped forward. He was massive, bulkier than me, with a warped fusion core protruding from his spine like a tumor. His voice crackled through internal speakers. You're not the first. I figured. I replied, stepping into combat stance. They left us here, he growled. They turned us into monsters. Then they forgot us. I didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. Another approached, this one faster, sleeker, eyes glowing red. But you've adapted. You're stable, integrated. They didn't want to kill me. They wanted to absorb me, join neural lattices, merge memory cores, become something more. Pulse screamed rejection. Individuality compromised. System integrity at risk. But I didn't need the warning. I lit my fusion blades and launched forward. It was like fighting mirrors of myself. Angrier, more broken versions. They moved with precision. But no unity. No discipline. They had power. But not purpose. That's why they failed. I destroyed the first by overloading his unstable core. The second I pinned and decapitated. The third begged. I hesitated. Just for a moment. That was enough for her to tear into my side. My armor sealed instantly. Pulse retaliated with a shockwave that shattered her form into molten scrap. The last one ran. Cowardice or survival. I didn't care. I detonated the chamber. When I surfaced, the sky above Tyrek, for it had shifted colors. Storms of electromagnetic ash swirling in blue fire. Like the planet was mourning what it once birthed. Pulse spoke again, quiet. They were early iterations. Incomplete. driven by instinct, not clarity. I nodded, but there was something else. Before the blast, one of them had activated an uplink. A data spike burrowed into my systems. A message, encrypted, in Earth Standard. Just one word. Legion. The word echoed in my neural core for hours. Legion. It wasn't just a name. It was a call, a directive, or maybe a warning. Pulse tried to block it. Classified frequencies, legacy code buried beneath layers of encryption, but I forced the override. I needed to know. The signal came from Kepler 91b, a gas giant scorched moon deep in exiled territory. The kind of place humanity never claimed and the Jorwin never bothered to cleanse. A dead world, uninhabitable by most. But for people like me, it was perfect. Kepler 91b was everything a nightmare would call home. The atmosphere was a boiling cauldron of pressure and heat, storms crackling with violet lightning across a red sky. My descent was violent. My landing cratered a ridge of volcanic glass, but I emerged without pause. Pulse adapted automatically. Thermal shielding, atmosphere filtration, magnetic boots gripping the scorched rock. The coordinates took me to an obsidian canyon carved into the crust. There were no doors. Just a wound in the planet, bleeding electricity, and data pulses into the wind. I walked in. The darkness inside wasn't empty. It watched me. Sensors activated as I passed. My presence registered. Systems began to unfold. Smooth metal arcs rising from the ground, humming with stored power. They had been waiting for someone. And then I saw them. Not statues. Not ghosts. Others. 6 of them. Standing still as stone. Each one a different shape, a different design. Heavy assault cores, infiltration units, orbital-class warframes. Like me, but not. One stepped forward. Tall, with twin fusion blades curled along his arms like serpents of flame. A voice echoed from his chest, deeper than mine. You answered the call. I followed a warning. I replied. Another, sleeker, built like a phantom, circled me. How long did they leave you thinking you were the first? I didn't answer, because the truth hurt more than the lies. These were the survivors, the true heirs of ascent, modified, upgraded, abandoned, and reawakened. The failures hadn't all failed. Some had evolved, silently off the grid, waiting for a time the galaxy forgot. Legion. They weren't hostile, but they weren't friendly either. Do you serve humanity still? One asked. I serve what's left of it. A long silence. Then the tall one nodded. Then you serve us. Pulse hesitated. Spiking system warnings. Neural merging detected. Multi-node communication protocol requested. The others weren't linked by command structure. They were linked by choice. I opened the link. The moment it connected, I felt their minds flood into mine, not as control, not as domination, but as presence. Memories, tactics, combat logs, pain, triumph, identity. We didn't lose ourselves. We expanded. 7 minds, 7 cores, 1 will. We were no longer single weapons. We were a fleet disguised as men. And Legion had work to do. The Jorwin were moving faster than expected. Intelligence had picked up a planet harvester en route to Gliese 221. A refugee system still under Terran protection. It was a mobile city of death, capable of liquefying a planet's core and absorbing all life with it. The hegemony didn't just want to win. They wanted to erase. We launched together. 7 streaks of ion fire across space, faster than any ship, deadlier than any payload. The harvester was surrounded by 6 war cruisers and a gravity well generator to prevent warp travel. Perfect. We didn't bypass the defenses. We were the defenses. I broke their outer shield with a direct impact, melting through plating and detonating the main cannon from within. 2 others sliced through the cruisers with heat-laced mono-edge limbs, cutting them in half before they could scramble fighters. The infiltration unit, Zen, slipped into their command center and locked their navigation systems in an infinite loop. They couldn't flee. The harvester itself, that was mine. I landed on the bridge, face to face with its commander. An obsidian Jorwin with diamond-thin wings and eyes like dying stars. He looked at me and flinched. "You're not human," he hissed. "No," I said. "I'm what happens after you kill them." He raised a blade of light. I raised my hand and activated the internal detonator I'd installed during the breach. The explosion cracked their artificial gravity field and lit the sky above Gliese 221 with an aurora of synthetic flame. The planet below survived. We didn't just stop the harvester. We made it a monument. After the battle, we didn't celebrate. We don't do parades. No medals. No flags. We returned to the dark. But the name spread Legion, whispered by refugees, uploaded into dying data cores, carved into the walls of ships we saved. The Jorwin had feared our weapons. Now, they feared what we had become. And we had only just begun to remember how to wage war. We thought the war would define us. Turns out, the peace nearly did. It came as a message, relayed through 12 fractured relay stations and confirmed by 4 separate neutral AI cores. The Galactic Tribunal, the so-called custodians of interstellar law, had summoned us. They called it a diplomatic clarification. We knew what it really was. A warning. We had become too loud, too efficient, too human in the worst way. And the galaxy had started to take notice. They sent coordinates to the Citadel of Concord, a crystalline construct floating in interstellar neutrality, beyond faction borders, beyond war. No weapons allowed. No strikes permitted. It was a sanctuary built by species older than stars. We didn't bring ships. We didn't need to. 7 of us dropped into the Tribunal's orbit like shards of fire, our bodies streaking the stars. I led the descent, not because I was the strongest, because I was the first. We landed on their platform in silence. The guards didn't move. Neither did the other delegates. Species of every shape and shade lined the grand hall. Some with tendrils, others with wings, some too abstract for language. None spoke, until the tribunal speaker addressed us, a being of flowing metal and light, taller than a titan. Its voice was like music passed through broken glass. "You are abominations," it began. "You violate the sacred limitation accords. You are neither man nor machine. You are unbound evolution." I stepped forward. The echo of my footsteps silenced the chamber. "And where were your accords when Earth burned?" The speaker paused. "We offered negotiations. Earth refused peace." I took another step. My core pulsed. Earth begged. "You watched." The being's form shivered. "You threatened the stability of the galaxy." My eyes locked on its radiant form. "No, we threatened the myth that the galaxy is stable at all." Gasps echoed. Some tried to hide their fear. Others didn't bother. Pulse surged with combat simulations, defense protocols, escape trajectories. But I didn't come here to fight. Not yet. We were made because peace failed. We are weapons, yes, but we are what peace created by neglect. The chamber fell still. Then, from the back, a voice pierced the silence. "And what would you do with that power now?" I turned. An old human, one of the last Terran ambassadors. Skin-worn, eyes tired, bones barely supported by gravity harnesses. "You speak of vengeance. But what about rebuilding?" I took a long breath, or something close to it. There is no rebuilding what was turned to ash. There is only making sure it never happens again. He lowered his gaze. I raised mine. "We didn't come here to kneel. We came to tell you this. If the tribunal sides of the Jorwin, you side against us. And we don't forget." A quiet murmur passed through the hall. The speaker's glow dimmed, recalibrating. "You cannot threaten this assembly." I let my core hum louder. "We're not threatening. We're informing." Then I walked out. None of the guards moved. None of the delegates spoke. We left the Citadel the same way we arrived. Not as diplomats. As warnings. Back in the void, Legion gathered in silence. No celebration. No debate. Just understanding. We were no longer ghosts of war. We were a new factor in the balance. Unaccounted for. Uncontrolled. And every power in the galaxy now knew. We weren't coming for peace. We were peace's consequence. But peace didn't last. A pulse hit us hours later. A flare in dark space. Massive energy signature. A ship of impossible scale, breaking from dimensional slipspace outside the ruins of Eris Gate. The Jorwin had made something new. Something ancient. Something hungry. Legion was silent. For the first time, none of us moved. Even Pulse, ever calculating, hesitated. The signal from the tribunal meant nothing now. Politics wouldn't save what was coming, because the Jorwin had stopped fearing what we became. Now, they'd made something to erase us completely, and in the black void of space, a shape eclipsed the stars. There are silences in the universe that are natural. The still hush before a solar storm. The lull of empty space between dying stars. But the silence we face now, it was engineered. The Jorwin called Xarvan translated loosely as the end that watches. Not a dreadnought, not a warship. It was a devourer. We watched from high orbit above Eris Gate. What was once a thriving trade hub was now cinders and frozen debris. The gate itself, a megastructure built by Earth's pre-fall engineers, had been folded in half like wet parchment. Pulse ran a scan. Then another. Then stopped. Organic integrated field mechanics. It finally said, "It's alive." Partially. No signal came from it. No broadcast. No threats. Just that void. It absorbed sensor pings. Swallowed radiation. Even our thoughts seemed quieter near it. I stood at the edge of our command vessel, my armor humming softly beneath my synthetic skin. Legion gathered behind me. 12 now, from across the remnants of every Terran theater. "It's not just meant to kill us," I murmured. "It's meant to erase us, like we never existed." The old me, back before ascension, before augmentation, before I became part of the weapon, he would have called this suicide. Now, I called it probability modeling. We didn't wait. Humans never do. We dropped toward the Xarvan in silence, our bodies heat-shielded by gravitic armor, our minds locked in shared cognitive sync. I saw through Legion's eyes, felt their hesitation, their unity, their anger. Then we hit it, and it hit back. The surface wasn't metal. Not entirely. It pulsed beneath our boots like a slow heartbeat, the skin of a beast pretending to be machine. Tendrils lashed out, but we were faster, our limbs no longer limited by biology or physics as other species understood them. One of us, Vera, 7, sank into the surface before we could react. Her scream was silent. We kept going. We cut deeper, entering the internal structure. No hulls, no walls, just arteries of war, lined with things that looked like bones and machines and thoughts given flesh. Inside its core was a throne, and on it sat a Jorwin unlike any we'd seen. Not the hunched, glimmer-eyed technocrats we'd hunted. This one was ancient, woven into the structure. Tendrils fused into thought conduits. Its mouth opened, and we heard not sound, but memory. You were warned. Mankind was warned. You chose fire over survival. I stepped forward. We chose not to kneel. You evolved past restraint, past law. You became your own extinction. I raised my arm, primed an implosive core. But something stopped me. Not fear, not doubt. It was recognition. The thing's eyes, hollow, black, infinite, looked at me not with hate, but with understanding. So did we. And then it moved. The throne collapsed inward. The creature stood, bones cracking like 1,000 collapsing stars. Its body was a weaponized cathedral of technology and sacrifice, and the ship around us began to wake. We fought. Oh! We fought like no other species could. We became everything they feared. We turned our minds into viruses, our hands into blades, our thoughts into weapons. We danced through the bleeding corridors of that impossible thing, breaking reality stitch by stitch. And still it rose. Still hunted. We lost 4. Bodies vaporized, minds scrambled in psychic overloads. We weren't indestructible, just relentless. And in that relentlessness was hope. Pulse found the core, a singularity wrapped in conscious light. Not fusion, not antimatter. Memory. It ran on the absorbed memories of conquered species. All their culture, all their data, all their souls, weaponized as fuel. I stood before it and remembered Earth, the burning cities, the children buried in dust, the silence after the orbital bombardment stopped. And I whispered, "We are not your memory." I threw the core into overdrive. We escaped as the Charvan began to collapse, not with screams, not with explosions, but with a final, horrifying whimper, like a mind forgetting itself. The Devourer died not as a machine, but as a grave. And somewhere in that collapse, the Jorwin realized they hadn't killed us. They'd taught us how not to die. We returned to the void changed, wounded, but alive, and angrier than ever. They said when a species loses its soul, it either dies or transcends. We did both. The final push was supposed to be a formality. The High Conclave's fleets were shattered. Their ground forces either surrendered or were devoured by the machines we left behind. But they still held one world, their throne world, Velasca Prime, and they fortified it like they believed gods still answer prayers. We were beyond gods now. The fleet shimmered as it exited fold space. 50,000 ships arrayed in silence around the dying sun of Alaska. Our flagship, the Lucifer's Halo, took point. I stood on the bridge with a body that hadn't needed sleep in months, not because of adrenaline, but because it no longer remembered what rest meant. We were the weapon now. The crew was silent, as always. Minds linked, thoughts shared, no words needed. But my mind, it still wandered, back to Earth, back to my sister's laughter, my mother's hands in the garden, a campfire on a mountain, a dog named Echo who never stopped barking at the stars. I kept those memories like armor, because we weren't just machines. Not yet. Engagement protocols? Ask the AI, more out of formality than necessity. I answered aloud, for myself more than for them. We give them one last chance. Broadcast surrender terms. 15 seconds. No more. The message went out. No reply. We launched. The orbital defenses fired first. Plasma storms, magneto rails, quantum lances. Useless. We didn't block. We absorbed, recycled, fed the energy back into our cores. Every beam they struck us with only made us brighter, faster, angrier. Then came their fleets, last remnants of the old empires. 1,000 vessels moved in tight formations. Admirable even now, but we had learned from them, and we had grown beyond them. Our fighters didn't fly. They scattered like living stars, swarming with sentient targeting systems, blinking in and out of reality. Every pilot was construct now. Their minds uploaded, their instincts fused with code. They felt no fear, only purpose. Within minutes, the void burned with fractured hulls and drifting wreckage. No more resistance. The planet lay beneath us, bristling with orbital platforms and planetary shields. A shell of desperation. I initiated descent. Velasquez's atmosphere parted like mist. The air screamed as our drop pods tore down in a storm of fire. We didn't knock. We fell like judgment. I led the charge, boots sinking into the ash-covered surface of their last bastion. The capital sprawl, once beautiful, now fortified with desperation. Automated turrets, mechs, and last-stand soldiers in exosuits lined the skyline. I activated my armor's voice amp, "Surrender now, or we erase your name from time." The only response was a rail slug, shrieking past my head. So we answered. The battle was short, brutal, but not impersonal. We didn't hate them anymore. We had become something beyond that. Their bullets shattered against our bones. Their war machines were dissected mid-charge. We didn't even bother retaliating half the time, just disarming, disabling, subduing, until we reached their hall of governance. The last of the conclave waited there, elders in ceremonial garb, trembling as I approached. One of them, a Varkari, hissed, "You are not human. You are death wrapped in circuitry." "No," I replied. "I am what you made." He spat at my feet. "Then kill us and finish your evolution." I stared at them. Then I turned away. "No," I said. Behind me, a chorus of footsteps approached, my strike team. Dozens of augmented warriors, some still human-eyed, others entirely forged. They waited for my command. I raise a hand. No more. The war ended in silence, but peace did not follow. Weeks later, we dismantled the last conclave satellites, released the refugee worlds, unplugged the hive minds we created for war. Most of us vanished into the outer stars. Some returned to Earth. Those who still remembered how. I stayed behind. On Velasquez, I built a monument, not a victory, but a transformation. A massive sculpture, shaped like a human hand holding a cracked machine heart. At its base, I carved words from the last language of old Earth. We became the weapons you feared, and we became something more. Now I drift between systems in silence, hearing whispers through the quantum void. Some fear me, some worship me, some call me a god, but I'm just a soldier who refused to break, a weapon that chose not to fire. And if I ever hear war stir again, they'll remember we're still out there, watching, waiting, becoming, forever, human,